Hi Ritu Metsi, we are working on your comprehension skills, and the last page that we read was page 7, which reads as follows. Right about now, you're probably thinking, so far this is a pretty boring book. But just wait, because in a second, it's about to get really good. This one morning, when Roland's dad was on one of his trips, something totally crazy happened. Roland woke up early to practice his flute, but then it got really cold in his room. And when he looked out of the window, he couldn't believe it was snowing. Okay. And the questions that we have formulated based on what we have read on page 7 are as follows. Remember, when you read any text, any book, anything that you are given that you should read and answer questions on, means that the teacher is trying to see how well you have understood what you are reading. So the only way that we have to see how well you have understood what you are reading is by asking you questions and giving you the opportunity to formulate or make answers that show us that you have understood what you have read. Okay, so that is basically what we are practicing when we do comprehension work. Question 1 for page 7. Who is the narrator of the story speaking to in paragraph 1? The narrator of the story is the person who is telling the story. And you must pay attention to your mark allocation. This question is for 1 mark. The mark allocation is to guide you in terms of how much information you need to give me. So if you see that your answer is only for 1 mark, you need to be able to elicit, which means to go straight to the information that I am looking for in the entire text. So you're not going to tell me the whole story on page 7 just to give me the answer to question 1, because question 1 is only for 1 mark. You need to find who the narrator of the story is speaking to in paragraph 1. So what you will do, as you will read the paragraph, right about now, you're probably thinking, so far, this is a pretty boring book. But just wait, because in a second, it's about to get really good. So you will notice that the author or the narrator is speaking to the person that they are referring to as your. And you need to then think about who is the person that they are speaking to in this paragraph. And obviously that's going to require some thought from your part. So you need to think about it and use the information that you are reading in this paragraph to be able to come up with a justifiable answer to who they are speaking to in this paragraph. So comprehension work always, you will not always get the answer word for word in the text. Some of the questions will force you to think and to apply yourself so that you can be able to formulate an answer that makes sense and that will earn you your mark. All right. So you basically need to think about who the narrator is speaking to in paragraph 1. The story itself on page 7 doesn't tell you, it doesn't say the author is speaking to blah, blah, blah. It doesn't tell you word for word, but it gives you enough of a clue if you read the paragraph. Right about now, you're probably thinking, so far this is a pretty boring book, but just wait, because in a second, it's about to get really good. You are able to piece the information together to see, based on what you have read here, who the narrator is speaking to. Who is this year that the person telling the story is talking about here, or is talking to here in this paragraph? Question 2. What does the narrator of the story think the reader will think of the story so far? So here's another trick that you might want to you might want to use when you are doing comprehension work. Say, for instance, you are stuck and you can't come up with the answer for who the narrator is speaking to in the story. So what helps you when you do your comprehension work is, if you read through all of the questions in advance, by the time you read the story itself, you already have an expectation. You know what to expect. So if you read these questions, who is the narrator of the story speaking to in paragraph 1? Number 2, what does the narrator of the story think the reader will think of the story so far? Number 3, what does the narrator advise the reader to do for now? Number 4, how does the narrator describe the incident that happened in Roland's room? Number 5, why was Roland up early that morning? And what did he notice about his room? That's for 2 marks. What was causing Roland's room to be cold? So just by reading the questions, you have already given yourself some clues of what you can expect in the story and what answers you can expect to look for in the story. So what I was getting at is that if you were stuck on question 1 and you really couldn't make out who the narrator is speaking to, reading through the next question will kind of give you a clue. What does the narrator of the story think the reader will think of the story so far? So obviously, you know that there is a reader who's being spoken to somewhere in the story, right? So this might give you a clue about who the narrator is speaking to in paragraph 1, right? So that is how reading the questions that follow on in a situation where you can't figure out the answer might help you to figure out the answer for a question that you are stuck on. Okay, I've already read through all the questions and we went through them in our last session. So what I'll be expecting from you is to come back with the answers for question 1 through to question 6 for page 7 when I see you again on Saturday. But for today, this is your catch-up work for Saturday's class. I will read the questions first so that you have an expectation of what information you will be looking for on page 8. So question 1 says, why does the narrator think that the reader will be amazed because it is the middle of summer? That's for 2 marks, so I expect 2 pieces of information. Okay, number 2. What happened when Roland ran down to the kitchen to tell his mom about the snow? That's for 1 mark, so I expect 1 piece of information. But remember, your sentences still need your questions still need to be answered in full sentences, even if the question is just worth 1 mark. If you do not give me a full sentence for your question, I'm going to mark you down. I'm not going to give you the full mark, because even if your answer is correct but it's not in a full sentence, that is not the standard that is expected for comprehension work. Okay, number 3, what is Roland's nosy neighbor's name? That is for 1 mark. So what is the name of Roland's nosy neighbor? Number 4, why does the author call the neighbor nosy? So this is an application question. You're not going to find the answer word for word in the story, but the story gives you enough of a clue for you to develop your own opinion. Okay. So to be able to make up an answer based on what you've read. Number 5, what happened when Roland asked the nosy neighbor about his mom? So let's read through those questions again. You're going to copy them out for me, and then you're going to answer them and have answers for me for page 8 by the time I see you on Saturday as well, because then that will mean we can move on to page 9 and we will have caught up for the missed class on Saturday. Okay, so why does the narrator think that the reader will be amazed because it is the middle of summer? What happened when Roland ran down to the kitchen to tell his mom about the snow? What is Roland's nosy neighbor's name? Why does the author call the neighbor nosy? What happened when Roland asked the nosy neighbor about his mom? Page 8. Oh yeah, I probably should have mentioned that this was the middle of summer, because then you'd be even more amazed. Roland ran down to the kitchen to tell his mom about the snow, but he couldn't find her anywhere. So Roland went outside to ask his neighbor Mrs. Nettles where his mom was, because Mrs. Nettles was pretty nosy and she always knew everybody's business. But that's when Roland got some really bad news. So that's where your answers will be for all the questions that I have asked you based on page 8. You will answer those for me and read them back to me on Saturday when I see you. Peace out.